Hey everyone, welcome back to the Memory Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Lily, and wow, am I excited you're here today because we're diving into something that literally changed how I learn, study, and remember information for the rest of my life. Seriously, this episode is going to be different from anything you've heard before because we're not talking about complicated science or confusing techniques that take hours to master. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make this super easy for you to stay connected with our channel. If you've been finding value in our learning content, I would absolutely love it if you could hit that like button right now. It helps so many other people discover these episodes, and honestly, it means the world to me. So thank you in advance for that support, and let me know you're here by dropping a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we release episodes consistently, and each one is designed to help you become a better learner, a better communicator, and just all around more effective at retaining the information that matters to you. And here's something really cool. We've created a dedicated podcast playlist where you can find all of our episodes organized and ready for you to binge whenever you want. Check out that podcast playlist in the description or in the channel menu, and you'll find everything we've created so far. And if you really connect with what we're talking about today, share this episode with someone you know who struggles with remembering things. I promise you, you'll be giving them a gift because this information is genuinely life-changing. Now let's get into it because today's episode is really going to shift how you think about your memory forever. Okay, so let me start with something that I know for a fact you've experienced. You sit down, maybe it's a Monday evening or maybe it's a Saturday afternoon, and you decide today is the day I'm going to actually study this material. You've got your notebook, your pen, maybe some coffee. You're ready to focus. You read through the lesson really carefully, word by word, making sure you're not missing anything. Then maybe you listen to an explanation from a teacher or from another video on YouTube. You feel like you understood it in the moment. You feel confident. You even think to yourself, okay, I've got this. I'm going to remember this. Then comes the next day. You wake up and you think, let me test myself on what I learned yesterday. And you try to remember, and there's almost nothing there. It's like it just vanished completely. Maybe there's a vague sense that you learned something about it, but the actual details, the actual information, it's gone. And when that happens, you probably feel something like frustration or even disappointment in yourself. You think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I hold on to anything? Why is my memory so bad compared to other people? Maybe you even start believing something that is completely untrue about yourself. You think, I'm just not a person with a good memory. Some people are born with this ability to remember everything, and I'm just not one of them. I'm stuck with a weak memory, and there's probably nothing I can really do about it. And I want to tell you something right now with complete honesty and clarity. That belief is not true. There is nothing wrong with your brain. Your brain is actually working perfectly. The real issue is something completely different than what you think. The actual problem is that nobody ever taught you how memory really works. And here's the thing. Once you understand how your brain actually stores and retrieves information, everything changes. Your learning becomes easier. Your retention becomes stronger. And you stop feeling frustrated with yourself because you realize the frustration was directed at the wrong place. You weren't failing. You were just using a method that didn't match how your brain was actually designed to work. And that's exactly what today's episode is about. We're not going to talk about complicated neuroscience that makes your head hurt. We're not going to go through a bunch of difficult memory techniques that require hours of practice or special tools. We're just going to have an honest conversation about why we forget things and what we can actually do about it in our regular daily lives. Because the truth is, the most powerful memory techniques in the world are also the simplest. And they're things you can start using today, right after this episode ends. So let's start with the most fundamental thing you need to understand about how memory works. Here's the foundation of everything we're going to talk about. Forgetting is not a weakness. I want to say that again because it's that important. Forgetting is not a sign that something is wrong with you. Forgetting is not evidence that you have a bad memory. Forgetting is not something you should feel ashamed about. Forgetting is a completely normal, completely natural, and actually completely necessary process that happens inside every single human brain. And this includes the brains of people that you look at and think, wow, that person has an amazing memory. Even the people who seem like they remember everything, they forget things too. The difference isn't that their brain doesn't forget. The difference is that they've learned to work with the forgetting process instead of fighting against it. So why does forgetting happen? Well, let me paint you a picture of what's happening inside your brain every single day. Every moment of every day, your brain is receiving absolutely enormous amounts of information. There are words coming in from people talking to you. There are visual images coming in from everything you see. There are sounds in your environment. There are notifications on your phone constantly dinging and buzzing. There are conversations happening around you. There are advertisements trying to catch your attention everywhere. There are your own thoughts running through your mind. There are songs stuck in your head. There are memories of things that happened. There are feelings and emotions happening, and the list just keeps going. The amount of information hitting your brain constantly is absolutely staggering and honestly kind of overwhelming when you think about it. Now, here's the question. What would happen if your brain tried to keep all of that information? What would happen if every single sound, every single image, every single conversation, every single notification, every single random thought just stayed in your brain permanently? Well, your brain would become completely overloaded. It would be drowning in information. It wouldn't be able to function because there would be too much noise, too much stuff, too much data. And your brain would struggle to find the things that actually matter. So your brain does something incredibly smart. It decides what to keep and what to let go. Your brain is constantly, automatically, and quietly asking itself a question about each piece of information that comes in. That question is this important? Will I actually need this again? Will this be relevant to my survival or my daily life? If the answer to that question is yes, your brain holds on to it. If the answer is no, your brain lets it go. And here's the thing. This isn't your brain being lazy. This isn't your brain failing you. This is your brain being incredibly protective. Your brain is protecting you from drowning in information. Your brain is protecting you from being overwhelmed. Your brain is protecting you from complete mental chaos. So in a way, forgetting is actually a feature of your brain, not a bug. It's a protection mechanism. The challenge we face is that sometimes our brain makes a mistake about what's important. Sometimes our brain decides to let go of something that we actually wanted to keep. And understanding why that happens, understanding the specific reasons that our brain decides something isn't important when actually it is important, that's the first step to changing the situation and improving our memory. Let me walk you through the specific reasons that our brains decide to let go of information. And as I go through each one, I think you're going to have these moments where you're like, oh, that's what's been happening to me. That's why I keep forgetting things. That's the reason my memory has felt weak. Because once you identify the specific reason you're forgetting, you can address it directly. The first reason we forget things is actually really simple when you think about it. We forget things because we weren't really paying attention when we supposedly learned them in the first place. And I know what you might be thinking. Well, of course I was paying attention. I was sitting there listening. My body was in the room. But here's the difference between being in the room and actually paying attention. Have you ever experienced this moment? You're in a meeting with people talking. You're in a class with a teacher explaining something. You're in a conversation with someone. Your body is physically present in that location. You can see the person talking, you can hear the sounds coming out of their mouth, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. Your mind is thinking about something you need to do later today. Your mind is replaying a conversation that happened this morning that's still bothering you. Your mind is worrying about something coming up next week. Your mind is thinking about what you're going to eat for lunch. Your body is present, but your mind has left the building. You hear the sounds coming in, but you're not really listening. You're not really processing what's being said. You're not really taking it in. And then later, maybe an hour later, or maybe the next day, you have almost no memory of what was actually said during that time. You might remember the person was there. You might remember it was a meeting or a class, but the actual content, the actual information that was shared, it's gone. And in that moment, you might think, wow, my memory is really bad. But that's not actually what's happening. Your memory isn't the problem here. What's actually happening is that the information never really entered your brain in the first place. Memory can only store something that your brain actually received. Your brain can only remember things that you actually paid attention to. It's like trying to take a photograph. Imagine you have a camera, right? A really good camera. And you want to take a photograph of something, but you forget to take the lens cap off. So you point the camera at the beautiful scene. The moment is happening right in front of you. The camera is ready, everything is there, but the photograph comes out blank because the lens cap was on. That's what happens when we don't pay real attention. The information is there, your brain is there, everything is set up, but the real attention, the lens cap, is still on. So nothing actually gets captured. And this happens to all of us way more often than we probably realize, especially now in the modern world where we have so many things pulling at our attention all the time. Your phone is pulling your attention. Your thoughts are pulling your attention. The notifications are pulling your attention. Someone else's conversation nearby is pulling your attention. It's harder than it's ever been in human history to actually give something your full, undivided attention, and that's why attention has become such a valuable skill. So the first thing to understand about improving your memory is that it starts with attention. Before anything else, before all the techniques we're going to talk about, before the methods and the tips, it starts with real attention. And we're going to talk a lot more about how to actually build that attention skill later on. But for now, just understand that this is the foundation. The second reason we forget things surprises a lot of people because it goes against how we were taught in school. We forget because we try to memorize things without actually understanding them. Think about how many people study by just repeating things over and over. They spend hours reading a sentence. They write it out again and again. They repeat it out loud. They're trying to push the information into their memory by force, like they're hammering it in. But the brain doesn't work well with pure repetition alone. The brain works with meaning. The brain works with connections. When you understand something, when you really get it, your brain connects that new information to things you already know. Your brain builds links between the new stuff and the old stuff. And those links, those connections, that's what makes the memory strong and lasting. When you only repeat something without understanding it, when you're just saying the words over and over without knowing what they mean, your brain has nowhere to put the information. It has no connection to hold on to. It's like trying to glue a piece of paper to a wall, but there's no wall. There's nothing to attach it to, so it just slides off. It slips away. Let me give you a really practical example that you can probably relate to. Imagine someone asks you to memorize a phone number. Just repeat the digits. 5, 7, 3, 2, 1, 9, 4, 6. If you just repeat those numbers, you might remember them for a few minutes. Maybe you can get to your phone and dial it before you forget it. But if you put the phone down and come back an hour later, gone. But now imagine those numbers mean something to you. Maybe the first 4 digits, 5732, that's your birth year in a different format. Maybe the next digits, 19, those are the last digits of a year that was important to you. Maybe the final digits spell out something on a phone keypad. Suddenly, those random numbers have meaning. They're connected to things you already know. And when that happens, the memory becomes dramatically stronger. You can remember that phone number much longer because you've connected it to things that already exist in your brain. This principle works for everything you learn, and it's one of the most important things to understand. Understanding is the glue. Understanding is what makes information stick. When you're studying something and you feel like you're just memorizing it without really getting it, that's a sign that you need to pause and ask more questions. You need to slow down. You need to dig deeper until understanding happens. Because the time you invest in understanding, even if it takes longer, even if it feels slower, saves you so much time later. Because you won't have to keep reviewing something that keeps slipping away. You'll understand it once and remember it for a very long time. The third reason we forget things is something I think almost everyone has experienced at some point. The reason is stress. And this one is really important for anyone who has ever sat down to take a test and suddenly felt like their mind went completely blank. Or anyone who's tried to speak in a foreign language in a real conversation and forgotten words they know perfectly. When we experience stress or pressure, something actually changes in how our brain functions. The brain doesn't just get a little overwhelmed, the brain shifts its entire focus and attention. The brain stops prioritizing learning and memory and instead starts prioritizing survival. The brain becomes focused entirely on the threat, on the feeling of danger, on the feeling of fear that it's experiencing. When the brain is in that state, when it's in stress mode, it becomes very, very difficult to access memories that we actually have. The memory isn't gone. The information is still there, but it becomes temporarily unreachable because your brain is focused on what it perceives as survival. This is why you can know a word perfectly when you're relaxed at home. You can think about it, you can use it, you can explain it, you feel confident about it, and then someone asks you to use it in a real conversation, and suddenly your mind goes blank. Your face gets hot, you feel anxious, and you can't remember the word that you literally know perfectly. The word didn't disappear from your brain. The stress just made it temporarily unreachable. And this is actually a really important thing to understand about how our brain works. A calm, relaxed state of mind is not a luxury when it comes to learning and memory. It's not something nice to have. It's a genuine necessity. Your brain learns best when it feels safe. Your brain remembers best when it feels calm. So if you're trying to study while you're anxious about an upcoming deadline, if you're trying to learn while you're stressed about other things happening in your life, you're fighting against your own brain. You're making it harder for yourself. That's why taking care of your mental state and your stress level is actually directly connected to your ability to learn and remember. The fourth reason we forget is one of the most common reasons, and it's also one of the most fixable. We study something once, we think we understand it, we feel good about it, and then we never come back to it again. We just move on to the next lesson, the next topic, the next chapter. But memory doesn't work like a computer hard drive where you save a file once and it stays there forever. We just move on to the next lesson, the next topic, the next chapter. But memory doesn't work like a computer hard drive where you save a file once and it stays there forever. But the point is that memory does fade, and what stops it from fading, what keeps the memory strong, is returning to the information again and again. But here's the important part. You don't need to review something 10 times on the same afternoon. That's not effective. What's effective is coming back to it the next day, then a few days later, then a week later, then maybe 2 weeks later. Each time you return to something you learned before, each time you come back to that information, your brain receives a message. The message is, this information keeps coming back. That means it must be important. That means my person is trying to hold on to this information. I should probably keep it safe. I should maintain this memory. And it works. Each time you review, your brain gets stronger and more committed to holding on to that information. But if you never come back, if you just learn something once and move on, your brain simply concludes that this information is no longer needed. It's no longer relevant. You're not trying to use it. You're not trying to remember it. So why should I keep it? And your brain quietly removes it. It clears it away to make space for other things. The good news is that each review doesn't need to take a long time. You don't need to sit down for an hour to review something. Even 5 minutes of returning to something you learned 3 days ago can make a significant, measurable difference in whether you remember it long term. So the habit isn't about spending more time, it's about spending time in the right way, spread out over a longer period. The 5th reason we forget things is something that most people really underestimate. The reason is sleep. And I want to spend a bit of time on this one because it's probably one of the most powerful factors in whether your memory works well or not. And yet, it's the thing that people sacrifice the most, especially people who are trying to learn a lot. They think, well, if I sleep more, I have less time to study. So they cut back on sleep. They stay up late studying. They try to squeeze more studying hours into their day. They think they're being productive, but they're actually doing the opposite. Here's what's happening. When you sleep, your brain is not resting. People think sleep is like turning off your computer, like you shut down and nothing happens. But that's completely wrong. When you sleep, your brain is actually working harder in some ways. Your brain is going through everything you experienced and learned during the day. It's deciding what to keep and what to clear away. It's reorganizing information. It's strengthening the memories that felt important. The information that felt valuable and relevant to your life, your brain strengthens during sleep. The information that felt unimportant or irrelevant, your brain clears away during sleep. This process cannot happen properly and cannot happen completely without enough sleep. When you cut your sleep short to study more, you're actually reducing your brain's ability to hold on to what you studied. You're undermining the very thing you're trying to build. You're trying to build memory and retention, but you're cutting off the time when your brain actually makes that memory permanent. So you're defeating yourself. Sleep is not time wasted. Sleep is not laziness. Sleep is not something you do when you're giving up on studying. Sleep is when your memory is actually being made. Sleep is when your learning becomes permanent. And if you want a strong memory, if you want to retain information long term, you need to take sleep seriously. You need to protect your sleep. You need to prioritize it. That doesn't mean you need to sleep 12 hours a day, but you need enough sleep that your brain can do the work it needs to do. The 6th reason we forget things is that we learn them, but then never actually use them. And this one is actually really practical because it shows you something important about how to fix it. Your brain has a very practical way of deciding what to keep and what to let go. Your brain keeps what gets used. Your brain keeps what you actually do things with. If you learn a new word, like let's say you learn a word in English, and you never speak it, you never write it, you never hear it in a real context, you never actually use it, your brain eventually comes to a conclusion. Your brain thinks, this word is not part of my person's active life. This is not something they do. This is not something they care about. Why should I keep it? And it lets it go. But here's the flip side. If you learn that same word and then you use it in a sentence the very same day you learned it, your brain gets a completely different signal. Your brain thinks, oh, interesting. This person is using this word. It's real. It matters. It's part of their actual life. I should keep this. I should remember this. And if you use that word again a few days later in a different situation, your brain gets that signal again and again, and the memory gets stronger and stronger. This is one of the most powerful things you can do for your memory. Use new information as soon as possible in a way that feels real and connected to your actual life. Don't just learn it in a book or in a lesson. Learn it and then use it. Apply it. Speak it, write it, do something with it. And when you do that, your brain will hold on to it. Now, all of the things I've told you so far, all 6 reasons that we forget things, they all come back to one thing. They all come back to attention. Because before your brain can remember something, before any of the memory techniques we're going to talk about can work, your brain first needs to truly receive the information. And that only happens when you're paying real attention. Real, genuine, full attention. We live in a time unlike any other time in human history when it comes to attention. We live in a time when our attention is pulled in many different directions all at the same time. Most people reading this have probably experienced this. You're reading a paragraph and you get to the end of it and you realize you have no idea what you just read. Your eyes moved across the words, but your brain wasn't there. You weren't actually reading it. Or you're listening to someone speak, and while they're talking, your mind is already forming a reply. You're not really listening to what they're saying. You're already planning what you're going to say next. Or you're watching a video while also scrolling through social media on your phone. Your attention is split between 2 things. And in all of these moments, attention was split and fractured. And when attention is split, the information never fully enters the brain in the first place. It never gets processed. It never gets stored. It just passes by like water flowing around a rock. There's a common belief in modern culture that doing many things at the same time is efficient. People talk about multitasking like it's a superpower, like it's something to be proud of. But for learning and memory, the opposite is actually true. When you focus on one thing completely, when you give something your whole attention, your brain treats that thing as significant. It pays close attention. It stores it more carefully. It makes stronger connections. One task done with full attention is remembered. Multiple tasks done halfway are forgotten. This doesn't mean you need to sit down and study for 4 hours without stopping. That's not realistic. And honestly, it's not even effective. It means that when you sit down to learn something, when you sit down to focus on something, you give it your whole mind for that period of time. Even if that period is only 20 minutes. 20 minutes of full attention is worth more than 2 hours of half attention. And the simplest way to protect your attention is to remove the things that break it. Put your phone in another room. Close the browser tabs you don't need. Close the apps running in the background. Tell yourself, for the next 20 minutes, this is the only thing I am doing. And then actually do it. That single habit, practiced consistently, will improve your memory more than any fancy technique or any special trick, because it all starts with attention. Before we move on to talking about specific techniques and methods, I want to say something that brings all of this together. Everything in this episode so far points toward one really simple truth. Memory is not a fixed thing that you're born with. Memory is not something that's determined by genetics and just locked in. Memory is something that responds to how you treat it. It's something that adapts based on what you do. Give your brain real attention, genuine understanding, enough sleep, regular review spread over time, and real opportunities to use what it learns. And your brain will remember. It won't remember perfectly. It won't remember immediately. But it will remember consistently and increasingly over time. You are not a person with a bad memory. That's not who you are. You are a person who has not yet learned how to work with your memory the way it actually works. And that changes today. That changes right now as you listen to this. So now that we understand why we forget, the question becomes, what can we actually do about it? What are the actual strategies we can use? What are the methods that actually work? And I want to start with the thing that matters most. The thing that comes before any technique. The thing that comes before any method. That thing is attention. And we're going to talk about it in more detail because it's really that important. Here's something important. Attention is not fixed. Attention is not something you're born with and stuck with. Attention is a skill. And like any skill, like learning to cook or learning to play an instrument or learning to speak a language, attention can be trained. Attention can be improved, but before you try to train it, it helps to understand one simple thing about how the brain works. The brain pays attention to what it finds interesting. The brain pays attention to what it finds useful. The brain ignores what feels pointless. The brain ignores what feels boring. The brain ignores what feels irrelevant. And this is not laziness. This is not a character flaw. This is the brain being smart and efficient. The brain has limited resources, and it directs those resources toward things that matter. So one of the most powerful things you can do to improve your attention is to ask yourself one simple question before you start learning something. Ask yourself, why does this matter to me? Where will I actually use this? That one question changes everything. That one question changes the entire experience of learning. When your brain sees a real reason to pay attention, when your brain understands why this matters to your life, to your goals, to your future, it pays attention. When your brain sees no reason, when you can't answer that question, your brain wanders. So don't just open a book or start a lesson without first giving your brain a reason to care. Take 10 seconds. Ask yourself, why does this matter? Why am I learning this? How will I use it? Then begin. And you'll notice that your attention is different, your focus is different, your ability to actually learn is different. The second thing that genuinely helps with attention is curiosity. And here's the cool part. You can create curiosity deliberately. You don't have to wait for a topic to naturally excite you. You can deliberately create curiosity for topics that don't naturally interest you. Instead of starting with the answer, start with a question. Instead of saying to yourself, today I'm going to learn about grammar rule number 7, ask yourself questions. Asked, I wonder why this sentence sounds strange and that one sounds natural. Let me find out. I wonder what's going on here. Questions wake the brain up. Questions give the brain something to solve. They create a puzzle. And a brain that is solving a puzzle is a brain that is paying attention. A brain that is solving a puzzle is a brain that is engaged. Try this the next time you sit down to study anything. Before you read the material, before you listen to the lesson, look at the title or the topic and ask yourself 3 questions. First question, what do I already know about this? Second question, what do I not understand yet? What's confusing to me? And third question, what do I want to find out? What am I curious about? Write those questions down or just think about them. Then read or listen with those questions in your mind. And I promise you will notice the difference immediately. You'll be more engaged, you'll remember more, you'll understand more deeply. Now, another thing that most people get wrong about attention is how long you should study at one time. Many learners believe that studying for 2 or 3 hours in one sitting is more productive than studying for shorter periods with breaks. But this is not how attention actually works in practice. This is not how the brain actually functions. The brain's ability to focus deeply, to really concentrate and absorb information, starts to fade after about 20 to 30 minutes of continuous effort. After that time period, your brain is still producing activity. You're still looking at the material. You're still technically doing the work, but the quality of your attention drops. The depth of your focus decreases. You're reading, but not really taking it in. You're listening, but the information is not sticking. You're going through the motions, but you're not really learning. Short, focused sessions with real breaks between them are consistently more effective than long, tired sessions. This is proven by research over and over again. Here's a rhythm that works really well for most people. 25 minutes of complete focus, then a 5-minute break where you actually rest. And I mean actually rest. Don't check your phone during that break. Don't scroll through social media. Here's a rhythm that works really well for most people. 25 minutes of complete focus, then a 5-minute break where you actually rest. And I mean actually rest. Don't check your phone during that break. Don't scroll through social media. You don't need more hours. You need better hours. Quality over quantity always wins. And the single most practical thing you can do to protect your attention and improve your learning right from the beginning is to prepare your environment before you begin studying. This sounds small. This sounds like it might not make a big difference, but it really does. Every distraction that is present when you start studying is a problem waiting to happen. Your phone is a distraction. Even when your phone is face down on the table, even when it's on silent, it still pulls your attention. Research has shown this repeatedly. Just having your phone nearby, even when it's completely silent and turned over so you can't see it, reduces your ability to focus. Your brain knows it's there. Part of your brain is quietly monitoring it. Part of your brain is wondering if there's a notification. So put your phone in another room. Don't just put it face down. Remove it from your environment. Close the browser tabs you don't need. If you have 10 tabs open and only need 2, close the 8 you don't need. Close the browser tabs you don't need. If you have 10 tabs open and only need 2, close the 8 you don't need. Find what works for you. Or move to a quieter place if that's possible. These are not dramatic changes. These are not huge lifestyle overhauls. But they create the conditions where real attention becomes possible. And real attention is where real memory begins. It's that simple. Now let's move to something that changes everything about how we learn and how we remember. And it's something that goes against what most of us were taught. Most of us were taught that memory means repetition. It means reading something again. It means saying it again. It means writing it again. And repetition does have some value, but only when it's built on top of genuine understanding. Without understanding, repetition just creates what I call surface memory. The information sits at the top of your mind for a short time, and then it slips away like water sliding off a duck's back. But with genuine understanding, something completely different happens. Your brain connects the new information to things it already knows. It builds a structure. It creates links. It makes connections. And that structure, those links, those connections, that's what makes the memory strong and lasting. That's what makes it stick for years, not just for days. Let me give you a really clear example that shows the difference between these two. Imagine you've never visited a city before. Someone reads you a list of street names. Okay, there's Main Street, and Oak Avenue, and Riverside Drive, and 3rd Street, and Park Lane. You repeat those names. You try to memorize them. You say them out loud, and then a week later, you try to remember them, and almost all of them are gone. You might remember 1 or 2, but most of them have completely vanished. Now imagine instead that you actually visit that city. You walk through the streets, you see how the streets connect together. You notice that the main road runs north to south through the middle of the city. You find a big landmark, maybe a park or a fountain, right in the center. You walk around and get a sense of how everything relates to everything else. You build a mental map. Now the same streets become part of that map that you can actually navigate. You didn't memorize more information, but you understood more information. And that understanding turned the isolated names into a connected picture that your brain could hold. This is exactly how all learning works. When you understand something, your brain says, I see how this fits with what I already know. I see how this connects, and those connections are what make the memory last. So here's the practical question. How do you actually build understanding instead of just memorizing? And the most powerful method is also the simplest method. Try to explain what you just learned in your own words. Explain it as if you're talking to a friend who knows nothing about the topic. Don't use the exact words from the lesson. Don't recite the definition, just explain the idea in the way you naturally speak. This one action, this one simple thing, reveals something extremely important. If you can explain it simply, you understand it. If you can't, you're just memorizing it. And the act of trying to explain it, even when you struggle, even when you get stuck, even when you have to pause and think about how to say something, that struggling process is itself what deepens the understanding. It forces your brain to process the information in a new way. It forces you to translate it from someone else's words into your own words. And that translation process is incredibly powerful for learning. You don't need a real person to explain things to. You don't need an audience. You can talk to yourself while you're walking. You can write a few sentences in a notebook. You can record a voice message on your phone and talk into it. The medium doesn't matter. What matters is making your brain produce the idea in its own words, not just recognize it when it sees it again in a book or in notes. Another thing that makes understanding much deeper and makes memory much stronger is connecting new information to your real life. Abstract information is really difficult for the brain to hold because it has nowhere to attach it. There's no connection point. There's nothing to anchor it to. But the moment you connect an idea to a real experience, to a personal memory, to a situation from your actual daily life, the brain has something concrete to link it to. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're learning a new English word like exhausted. If you just repeat it 10 times with its definition, it might stay in your head for a day or two, and then it's gone. But if you think of a specific moment when you felt truly exhausted, really think about it. Maybe it was after a long week at work. Maybe it was after a difficult journey. Maybe it was after an intense workout. Get specific. Picture that moment. Feel it again. Think about how your body felt. Think about your energy level. Think about the heaviness. Connect that memory to the word. Something changes. The word is no longer just a definition sitting in your brain. It's attached to a real feeling. It's attached to a real experience. It's attached to something that already lives in your memory. And words, information, ideas that are attached to real experiences and real feelings are far, far easier to recall when you actually need them. Now I want to say something about the connection between understanding and stress because it matters more than most people realize. Many people feel a quiet fear when they sit down to study. They feel fear that they won't remember. They feel fear that they'll forget again. They feel fear that they're not smart enough to hold on to things. And this fear, even when it's small and quiet in the background, creates tension in the mind. And tension makes it harder to think clearly. Tension makes it harder to focus. Tension makes it harder to remember. Understanding is one of the most direct ways to dissolve that fear. When you understand something, you feel a kind of stability. You feel like you're standing on solid ground. You feel like you're not just holding a piece of paper that the wind might take away. You feel confident. And confidence in learning is not just a nice feeling. Confidence is a genuine tool. A confident mind is open. A fearful mind is closed. An open mind learns faster. An open mind connects more deeply. An open mind remembers longer. So every time you catch yourself rushing to memorize something you don't yet understand, stop. Slow down. Ask one more question. Read it one more time. Take 5 more minutes to really understand it. Because the few extra minutes you spend understanding will save you hours of reviewing something that keeps slipping away. The time investment pays off. And before we move forward, I want to add one last thing about understanding because it connects everything we just talked about. When you truly understand something, coming back to it later becomes easy. You don't need to relearn it from the beginning. You only need a short reminder, and it comes back quickly. But when you only memorize something without understanding it, every single time you forget it, you have to start completely over. You have to repeat the same information again and again, and it keeps slipping away. You're stuck in this cycle. But understanding breaks that cycle. Understanding saves time. It reduces the pressure of learning, and it gives you a kind of confidence that memorization never can. Because you're not just holding a fact in your hand, you actually know what it means. You actually understand it, and that's worth everything. All right, now let's talk about specific techniques that help your memory work better. And I want to be honest with you here. There are many memory techniques out there in the world. You can look up memory techniques and find lists with 10 techniques, 15 techniques, sometimes even more. And most lists will give you tons of methods to try. But in my experience, that's actually too many. When you try to use 15 techniques at the same time, you end up using none of them well. You get overwhelmed. You get confused about which one to use when. You don't practice any single one enough to actually get good at it. So instead, I want to focus on the ones that are genuinely powerful and that you can actually start using today. You get overwhelmed, you get confused about which one to use when, you don't practice any single one enough to actually get good at it. So instead, I want to focus on the ones that are genuinely powerful and that you can actually start using today. The first technique is visualization, and it's one of the most effective tools your brain has. The reason it works is simple and straightforward. Your brain processes images much faster and much more deeply than it processes words. When you only read or hear something in word form, it stays at the surface of your mind. It doesn't go very deep. But when you create a picture in your mind connected to that information, your brain has something visual to hold on to. Your brain has something it can return to much more easily. So when you learn a new word, don't just read the definition. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the thing that the word describes. If the word is exhausted, don't just think the concept of being very tired. Picture yourself at the end of a long, difficult day. Feel the heaviness in your body. See yourself sitting down and not wanting to move. See the expression on your face. Create a vivid image. That image connected to the word is something your brain will hold much longer than a definition on a page. You can use this technique with any kind of information. Learning a process, imagine each step happening in front of you like a short film in your mind. Learning a list of items, create a visual image for each one. Learning a name connected to a face, make that connection visual. Maybe connect it to someone else you know with a similar name. The more vivid and specific the image you create, the stronger the memory will be. This is why people with good memories often naturally create images in their minds. And now you know how to do it deliberately. The second technique is one of the most powerful techniques that's ever been studied, and it goes completely against what most people do when they try to remember things. Most people, when they want to review something they've learned, they open their notes and they read them again. They open the textbook and they read the same chapter again. It feels productive. It feels comfortable. You're looking at the information. It seems familiar. It seems like you remember it. And you feel like you remember it. But here's the problem. Recognizing something when you see it is very, very different from being able to recall it when you need it. When you read your notes again, your brain is in recognition mode. It's like someone showing you a photo and asking, "Do you recognize this person?" Of course you do. You just saw them in your notes. But the only way to build real recall is to practice recall directly. And recall is harder than recognition. This means closing the book, putting away the notes, trying to remember without any help. What did I learn today? What were the main ideas? Can I explain this in my own words without looking? It feels harder, and that difficulty is exactly the point. When your brain has to work to retrieve information, when it has to search and find the memory rather than just recognize it, that searching and finding process is what makes the memory stronger. Scientists call this the testing effect. And it's one of the most reliable findings in all the research on how memory works. Students who tested themselves regularly, who practiced recall, they remembered far more than students who spent the same amount of time just rereading their notes. The testing group had stronger memories. They remembered longer. They forgot less. So after every podcast episode you listen to, after every lesson, after every chapter you read, close everything and ask yourself, what do I remember? Even if the answer is incomplete, even if you can only recall half of it, even if you get some details wrong, that practice is building your memory in a way that passive review never will. That active retrieval, that's the key. The third technique is about timing, and it might be the most practically important one of all. Your brain forgets information over time, and this forgetting happens in a predictable pattern. Memory is strongest right after you learn something. Then it starts to fade. The fade happens naturally, but here's the key. If you come back to the information just before it fades completely, something important happens. Your brain holds on to it much longer the next time. And if you do this again and again at increasing intervals, the memory eventually becomes very strong and very stable and very long-lasting. In practice, here's how it works. If you learn something today, you should review it tomorrow. Not for a long time, just 5 or 10 minutes to remind yourself. Then come back again after 3 days. Then after a week. Then after 2 weeks. Each time you return, the memory gets stronger, and the next gap before you need to review can be a little longer. This approach is called spaced repetition, and what makes it so effective is that it works with the natural rhythm of how your brain stores information instead of fighting against it. The most common mistake people make is reviewing everything on the same day they learn it. They study the same material 3 times in one evening and feel like they've prepared well. But that same day repetition doesn't give the brain a chance to forget and then recall. And that forgetting and recalling process is exactly what makes the memory strong and durable. A short review spread across several days is far more powerful than a long review done all at once. This one technique, if you implement it, will probably change your learning more than anything else. Okay, so now I want to bring all of these techniques together and show you what a good learning habit actually looks like in real life. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you finish listening to this podcast episode right now. At the end, you close the podcast. And before you do anything else, you spend 3 minutes asking yourself what you remember. You don't check your notes, you don't listen to it again. You just try to recall, what were the main points? What surprised you? What do you want to remember? You write down a few things, or you just think about it. Then later, before you go to sleep, you spend 5 minutes with a small notebook, and you write down 3 things from today that you want to remember. 3 main points, 3 ideas, 3 insights. Not everything, just 3 things. Then the next morning, you spend 2 minutes reading those 3 things and trying to explain each one in one simple sentence. Can you explain it without looking at the notes? 3 days later, you come back to those same notes for 5 minutes. You close the notebook and you try to recall those 3 points again. 1 week later, you do the same thing. That is the whole system. That's it. Short, regular contact with the same material spread across time, with active recall built in at every step. No long study sessions, no highlighting the same sentences again and again, just coming back, remembering, understanding, and moving on. And the words, the ideas, the information that once felt slippery and difficult to hold will slowly become part of the way you think, without forcing, without stress, without the constant feeling that you're studying things that keep disappearing. Memory works when you work with it, not when you fight against it. Now, let's talk about something that all the techniques and insights in this episode actually depend on, what you actually do every single day. Because memory is not built in one big study session. Memory is not built in one weekend of intense cramming. Memory is built in small moments repeated consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month. And the good news is that the habits that build strong memories don't need to be complicated. They don't need to be time-consuming. They just need to be real, and they just need to be regular. Consistency is more important than intensity. A small habit practiced every single day will build a stronger memory than a massive effort done once a month. So let's talk about the actual habits that create strong memory over time. The most important thing you can do in the morning is to protect the first few minutes of your day. The very beginning of your morning is precious. Many people wake up and immediately reach for their phone. Within 30 seconds, within 1 minute, their mind is already full of news and messages and notifications, all competing for their attention before the day has even properly begun. A mind that starts the day like that is already scattered. It's already pulled in different directions. And a scattered mind does not learn well. A scattered mind does not remember well. A scattered mind is already stressed before the day begins. Try something different. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes in the morning before you look at your phone, before you check your messages, before you see any notifications. Just 5 to 10 minutes. Use that time to breathe slowly. Use that time to think about what you want to learn or accomplish today. Use that time to be intentional about your day. Let your mind arrive at the day gently instead of being pulled into it forcefully. This one small change creates a quality of focus in the morning that is very difficult to achieve later in the day when everything is already noisy and chaotic. During the day, the single most powerful habit you can build is the habit of brief daily review. not long study sessions, not hours of work. Just short, regular moments of coming back to what you have already learned. 5 minutes in the afternoon, 3 minutes before dinner, a quick mental review while you walk somewhere, while you're waiting for something. The question is always the same. What do I remember from what I learned recently? Not rereading, not highlighting, not passive review, just trying to recall. What do I remember? This keeps the information active in your brain. This signals to your brain that it is still relevant. This prevents the slow fade that happens when we learn something once and then never return to it. The learning doesn't have to be recent. You can come back to something from last week or last month. It doesn't matter. Every time you successfully recall something, that memory becomes a little stronger and a little more permanent and a little more stable. Over months and years, these little moments of recall add up to genuinely strong memories. One habit that many people completely overlook is physical movement. And this one surprised me when I first learned about it. There's actual scientific evidence that physical activity, even gentle walking, improves your brain's ability to form and hold memories. When you move your body, blood flow to your brain increases. Your brain becomes more alert. Your brain processes information more efficiently. This is why some people find that ideas come more easily when they're walking than when they're sitting still. So, if you have studied something and you want it to stick, try going for a short walk afterwards. Even 10 or 15 minutes of gentle movement can help your brain consolidate what it just learned. And if you find yourself feeling mentally tired or foggy during a study session, getting up and moving briefly is often more effective than pushing through and staring at the same material with a tired mind. Movement wakes the brain up. Movement helps the brain function better. And then there's patience. I want to say this clearly and honestly because it's a part of memory improvement that most people don't talk about enough. Progress with memory is slow. Not because you're doing something wrong, not because the method doesn't work. It's slow because that's simply how the brain works. Real, lasting changes in how you learn and remember take weeks and months, not days. There will be times when you practice everything correctly and still feel like you're forgetting too much. There will be study sessions where recall feels difficult and slow. There will be days when you wonder if any of this is actually working. There will be moments of doubt. These moments are normal. They are part of the process. They don't mean you're failing. They mean you're in the middle of building something. The learners who develop genuinely strong memories are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who keep going on the days when it is hard, who trust that the building is happening even when they cannot see it directly, who understand that consistency over time will always produce results that talent alone never can. You don't need to be a naturally gifted learner. You need to be a consistent one. And consistency is something every person is capable of. Let me close with something I really hope you carry with you after this podcast episode. At the very beginning, we talked about that feeling, the feeling of studying hard and still forgetting, the feeling of working and feeling like nothing stays, the feeling of frustration and disappointment in yourself. I want you to understand now that that feeling was not evidence of a weak mind. That feeling was not evidence that you have a bad memory. That feeling was evidence of a method that was not matched to how your brain actually works. You were not failing at memory. You were using tools that were not designed for the job. Now you have different tools. You understand why the brain forgets and what it needs to hold on to. You understand the difference between passive exposure and active recall. You understand how to create connections that make information stick. You understand that timing of review matters as much as the content. You understand that none of this requires talent. It requires practice. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to do small things consistently, even on days when progress feels invisible. Your brain is not your enemy. It is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your job now is to work with it, not against it. Now that we've covered the why and the what, let's talk about the how. How do you actually implement these ideas into your real life? Because knowing something and doing something are two completely different things. You could listen to this entire podcast and think, wow, that all makes sense. I understand it. And then close it and do absolutely nothing differently. And your memory would not improve because knowledge without action doesn't create change. So let's talk about how to actually put this into practice starting today. The first principle of implementation is this: don't try to do everything at once. Don't try to overhaul your entire learning system today. Don't try to implement all the techniques. Don't try to build all the habits simultaneously. That's a recipe for overwhelm and giving up. Instead, start with one thing. Just one. Pick one technique or one habit that resonates with you most. Maybe it's the visualization technique. Maybe it's active recall. Maybe it's taking those 3 minutes to review before bed. Maybe it's protecting your phone time in the morning. Pick one thing, something that feels doable, something that feels like it could actually fit into your life, and commit to doing that one thing for at least a week. Get good at that one thing. Build that habit. Make it automatic. Then, after a week or two, when that first habit is starting to feel natural, add a second thing. Build on it. Gradually expand, but start with one. Here's a simple system you can use starting tonight. Tonight, before you go to bed, think about what you learned today. Maybe it was from listening to this podcast. Maybe it was from something else. Spend 2 minutes and identify one thing, one concept, one idea that you want to hold on to. Write it down in a notebook or type it in your phone. Just one thing. The next morning, spend 1 minute reading that thing. Try to remember it. Say it out loud. The next evening, spend 1 minute reviewing it again. 3 days later, spend 1 minute reviewing it. 1 week later, spend 1 minute reviewing it. That's the whole system. 4 minutes total spread across 1 week. And after 1 week, that information has been significantly strengthened in your memory. You can do this with multiple things if you want, maybe 3 things instead of 1. 3 minutes a week total. It's simple, it's effective, it actually works, and it requires almost no time. Another thing that helps is to track your progress in some way. You don't need anything fancy. You can just use a simple checklist or a simple notebook. Each day that you do your review, make a mark. Put an X, cross it off. Over time, you'll see a chain of X's, and that visual representation of consistency is actually motivating. It helps you keep going. You can also sometimes test yourself more formally. Every month, pick something you reviewed throughout that month and really test yourself on it. Can you explain it from memory? Can you recall it completely? Notice how much better you can remember it compared to if you had just learned it once. That success, that improvement, that's real feedback that the method is working. Everyone's brain works slightly differently, so while the principles we've talked about are universal, the specific implementation might look different for you than for someone else. Some people really benefit from visual images. Some people benefit more from talking things out loud. Some people prefer writing. Some people learn better while walking. Some people learn better in silence. Pay attention to what works best for your brain. The framework we've talked about, attention, understanding, active recall, spaced repetition, these principles apply to everyone. But the specific tools you use to implement those principles, those can be adapted to you. So experiment. Try the visualization technique. If it doesn't feel natural, try explaining things out loud instead. Try different approaches. Notice what makes your memory feel strongest. You will have days when you don't review. You will have weeks when you're busy and can't keep up with the habit. You will have moments when you forget something you thought you had learned. You will have setbacks. This is normal. This is expected. Don't let a setback become an excuse to stop entirely. If you miss a day, just pick it back up the next day. If you miss a week, don't think about the week you missed. Just come back. Coming back is more important than never missing. Consistency is built from coming back again and again, not from perfection. So release the idea that you need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent over time. Now let's talk about some deeper insights that might help you understand memory and learning at an even deeper level. These are things that might not seem directly practical, but they can shift your mindset about learning in powerful ways. Here's something interesting. The way you think about yourself as a learner affects your actual ability to learn. If you think of yourself as someone with a bad memory, that belief creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. You try less hard. You don't persist when things are difficult. You give up faster, and your memory doesn't improve. But if you think of yourself as someone who can build a strong memory through practice, that belief changes your actions. You persist more. You try harder. You don't give up. And your memory actually improves. So one of the first things to change is your identity. Stop thinking of yourself as a person with a bad memory. Start thinking of yourself as a person who is building a strong memory. You persist more. You try harder. You don't give up. And your memory actually improves. So one of the first things to change is your identity. Stop thinking of yourself as a person with a bad memory. Start thinking of yourself as a person who is building a strong memory. This might sound like positive thinking or affirmations, but it's more than that. It's setting an intention about who you are and then acting in alignment with that identity. An identity has enormous power. Something interesting happens when emotion is involved in learning. Emotional memories are stronger than non-emotional memories. This is why you can remember exactly where you were when you heard certain news, or what someone said to you that hurt you, or the feeling of an accomplishment. Emotion creates stronger memories. So if you want to remember something, one approach is to connect it to an emotion. If you're learning something, ask yourself, why does this matter to me emotionally? How does this connect to something I care about? What would change if I didn't know this? By connecting learning to emotion, you're leveraging one of your brain's most powerful memory mechanisms. This doesn't mean you need to be dramatic about it, just genuine. Make the connection real, and your memory will be stronger. One of the most powerful ways to strengthen your own memory is to teach what you've learned to someone else. When you explain something to another person, you're forced to organize your thoughts. You're forced to fill in gaps in your own understanding. You're forced to find ways to explain things clearly, and all of that process strengthens your own memory of the material. So find opportunities to share what you're learning with others. Explain it to a friend. Write a summary for someone. Make a video. Start a discussion. The act of teaching deepens your own learning more than almost anything else. As we mentioned earlier, curiosity is incredibly important for memory. But let me say more about it, because it's that important. Curiosity is the brain's natural motivation. When you're curious about something, you don't need external motivation. You don't need someone pushing you to study. You're internally driven to learn because you want to find out the answer. So throughout your learning journey, continuously ask questions. Never be satisfied with just memorizing an answer. Always ask why. Always ask how. Always ask what if. Questions keep your brain engaged. Questions turn passive listening into active investigation, and active investigation creates much stronger memories than passive reception. We talked earlier about sleep and memory, but I want to go deeper because this is so important. When you sleep, your brain isn't just resting. It's consolidating memories. It's deciding what to keep and what to clear. It's strengthening the pathways for memories that matter. And the quality of that consolidation depends partly on the quality of your sleep. Deep sleep is particularly important for memory consolidation. So protecting your sleep is not about being lazy. It's about being smart. It's about supporting your brain in the work it needs to do. So don't sacrifice sleep to study more. Instead, protect your sleep as part of your studying. Sleep is where the learning becomes permanent. We talked about stress reducing your ability to access memories during moments of panic or pressure. But there's a broader version of this. Chronic stress and chronic anxiety reduce your brain's ability to form new memories and consolidate them. When you're constantly stressed, your brain is in threat mode. It's not focused on learning and growth. It's focused on survival. So managing your overall stress level is actually a memory technique. Taking time to relax, taking time to exercise, taking time to enjoy things. These aren't distractions from learning. They're actually part of optimal learning. They create the conditions in your brain where memory can be strongest. Now, let's talk about how to apply these memory principles to specific situations. Different types of learning might require slightly different approaches. If you're learning a language, the principles we've talked about apply directly. Understand, don't just memorize. Connect words to real situations. Use spaced repetition. Find opportunities to actually use the language with real people. The most powerful language learning happens when you're forced to actually communicate. So don't just do vocabulary exercises. Find language exchange partners. Watch movies in the language. Read books or articles. Have conversations. Use the language in your real life if possible. The more real and practical the use, the stronger the memory for the language. For academic subjects like math, science, history, whatever you're studying, the same principles apply, but with a focus on deep understanding. For math, don't just memorize formulas. Understand why the formula works. Understand what it means. Understand where it comes from. Then practice solving problems. For history, don't just memorize dates and names. Understand the cause and effect. Understand why things happened. Create a narrative. For science, understand the principles. Understand how things connect. And then use active recall. Test yourself. Practice explaining. Build your understanding, then test yourself on that understanding. That combination is unbeatable. And then use active recall. Test yourself. Practice explaining. Build your understanding, then test yourself on that understanding. That combination is unbeatable. You can listen to podcasts about public speaking, but until you actually code, until you actually negotiate, until you actually speak in public, the learning stays superficial. So find ways to actually practice the skill. Maybe start small. Maybe practice in low-stakes situations, but actually practice. Use spaced repetition too. Don't just do a training once. Come back to it. Refresh your understanding. Try to apply it in new situations. The combination of understanding, practice, and spaced review is what builds genuine skill. If you're learning something creative like music, art, writing, the principles are similar, but the emphasis is different. Creativity requires both understanding and lots of practice and experimentation. So learn the fundamentals and understand them, then practice, but also experiment. Play with the skills, combine them in new ways, break the rules sometimes. The combination of solid foundational understanding plus creative experimentation is what produces growth. Let me tell you about some common mistakes that people make when trying to improve their memory, because if you know what to avoid, you can save yourself a lot of wasted time and frustration. The first mistake is trying to use too many techniques at the same time. You read about visualization, you read about spaced repetition, you read about active recall. You read about the memory palace technique. And you think, okay, I'm going to do all of these. And you try to combine them all, but then you get overwhelmed. You don't do any of them consistently, and your memory doesn't improve. Better approach. Pick 1 or 2 techniques. Master those. Get really good at them. Make them automatic. Then add more if you want, but start with simplicity. The second mistake is confusing familiarity with actual memory. You read your notes several times and they start to feel familiar. They start to feel like you remember them. And you think, okay, I've got this. I remember this. But familiarity is not memory. Just because something feels familiar doesn't mean you can actually recall it. So don't rely on how things feel. Instead, test yourself. Actually try to recall without looking. That will give you real information about whether you actually remember. The third mistake is studying without purpose. You open the textbook, you read through the material, you do the exercises, but you don't really have a clear reason why you're doing it, so your attention isn't focused. Your understanding isn't deep. Before you start studying anything, ask yourself, why am I learning this? What will I use this for? How does this connect to my goals or interests? That clarity of purpose is what directs your brain's attention and what makes learning actually stick. The fourth mistake is ignoring your learning style. Everyone's brain works slightly differently. Some people are visual learners. Some are auditory. Some learn by doing. Some learn by reading. If you're a visual person and you try to learn purely by reading, you're fighting against how your brain works. Pay attention to how you learn best. Some of that is personality and preference. Some of it is how your brain actually processes information. Work with your strengths. Use tools and methods that align with how you learn best. The fifth mistake is giving up when progress isn't immediate. You start using these techniques. You review things. You practice active recall. And in the first week, you don't feel like your memory has dramatically improved. So you think, well, this isn't working. I'm going back to the old way. But memory building is slow. Real changes take time, weeks and months. Don't evaluate your progress by the week. Evaluate by the month or the season. And remember that the changes are happening even when you don't notice them. Your brain is building stronger neural pathways. The connections are getting stronger. You just can't see them happening in real time. Be patient with yourself. Now let's talk about some special situations that affect memory. These are things that might be unique to your circumstances. One question people ask is whether memory changes as you get older. The answer is yes and no. Some aspects of memory naturally change with age. Processing speed might slow slightly. You might not memorize as quickly, but here's the good news. Understanding, wisdom, ability to see connections, these things often improve with age, and the techniques we've talked about work at any age. In fact, older learners often have advantages because they have more life experience to connect new information to. So age is not a barrier to building a strong memory. Different challenges maybe, but not insurmountable ones. Some people have memory challenges due to ADHD, dyslexia, or other neurological differences. The frameworks we've talked about can still help, but you might need to adapt them. You might need more structure. You might need more breaks. You might need different tools. The key principle is the same. Work with your brain, not against it. If you have ADHD and struggle with attention, you might need shorter focus sessions and more breaks. If you process information differently, you might need to adjust your study methods. But the principles, understanding, active recall, spaced repetition, these still apply. Stress, anxiety, and depression all affect memory and learning ability. When you're depressed, everything feels harder, including learning. When you're anxious, your attention is scattered. When you're stressed, your brain is in threat mode. So taking care of your mental health isn't separate from taking care of your memory. It's part of the same thing. If you're struggling with anxiety or depression, that's important to address directly. Get support, talk to someone, take care of yourself. And as your mental health improves, your memory and learning ability will improve too. Similarly, physical health affects memory. Exercise improves brain function. Nutrition affects brain health. Hydration matters. Getting outside and getting fresh air helps. These aren't luxuries or extras. They're part of how your brain functions optimally. So if you want a strong memory, take care of your physical health too. Now, let's zoom out and talk about long-term vision, because we've been talking about specific techniques and habits, but let's think about bigger picture. What are you trying to build? What kind of learner do you want to become? One of the most powerful things you can do is to build an identity as a learner, not as a student, not as someone who studies, but as someone who learns, someone who's curious, someone who grows, someone who develops new skills, someone who understands deeply. This identity becomes part of who you are. And once it becomes part of who you are, you naturally do the things that reinforce it. You naturally look for learning opportunities. You naturally review and consolidate. You naturally seek understanding. You naturally practice. The identity drives the behavior. Another important mindset is the continuous improvement mindset. Not perfection, not comparison to others, but continuous improvement. Every week, you're a better learner than you were the week before. Every month, your memory is a little bit stronger. Every year, you understand more deeply. This mindset removes pressure and judgment. You're not trying to be the best. You're just trying to be better than you were, and that's something everyone can do. The most sustainable approach is to integrate learning and memory building into your daily life, not as a separate thing you do, but as part of how you live. You're always learning. You're always reviewing. You're always growing. It becomes natural. It becomes automatic. It becomes who you are. As we wrap up this episode, I want to share some final thoughts and encouragement with you. First, understand this deeply. Your brain is capable. It's more capable than you probably think. You might have had experiences where you felt like you couldn't remember, and you built a story that your memory is weak. But that story isn't true. Your brain is fully capable of building a strong memory. You just needed to learn how to work with it. And now you know. It's never too late to start building a strong memory. You're not locked into your current level of memory. You're not stuck. You can change. You can improve. You can become someone who remembers. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many times you failed before. It doesn't matter what you used to believe about yourself. You can change starting today. Start small. Pick one thing. Do it consistently. Don't try to overhaul everything. Don't try to be perfect. Just pick one thing and do it every single day for 2 weeks. Then add another thing. Build from there. Consistency matters more than intensity. A small thing done every day will beat a big thing done once. Learning and memory building is a process. It takes time. There will be ups and downs. There will be moments when you feel like you're not making progress, but the progress is happening. Trust the process. Embrace the journey, because the journey itself is where the real growth happens. It's not just about the destination of having a strong memory. It's about becoming the kind of person who builds a strong memory. It's about developing discipline and consistency and self-knowledge. Finally, remember that you're not alone in this. Everyone struggles with memory sometimes. Everyone forgets. Everyone has experienced that frustration of studying and not remembering.
You're not broken. You're not unusual. You're having a completely normal human experience, and now you have tools and knowledge to address it.
Your brain is amazing. It's capable of so much more than you've probably used it for. You're about to unlock potential you didn't even know you had. And the world needs people who learn deeply. The world needs people who understand. The world needs people who remember and apply what they learn. So by improving your memory, you're not just improving yourself, you're positioning yourself to make a bigger impact. Start today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Pick one thing. Do it tonight. Review something before you sleep. Ask yourself what you remember from today. Write down one idea. Take that one small step. And then tomorrow, take another step. And the day after, another step. Small steps, consistent, over time, will take you further than you can imagine. All right, we've covered so much ground in this episode. We've talked about why you forget, how your brain actually works, specific techniques that actually work, habits you can build, mindsets that support learning, and everything in between. I hope you feel like you have a much clearer understanding of your memory and what you can do about it. If this episode has been helpful to you, I really would appreciate it if you could go back and hit that like button. It helps the algorithm show this to more people who need it. And please subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep making episodes like this. We're building a community of real learners here. People who care about understanding, who care about growing, who care about becoming better versions of themselves. And don't forget to check out that podcast playlist that we have. You can find it in the channel menu or in the description. We've put together all of our podcast episodes organized and ready for you. So if you want to go back and listen to other episodes, if you want to binge through them, they're all there in one place. And if you know someone who struggles with remembering, please share this episode with them. I genuinely believe this information can change their life, just like it changed mine, and hopefully it's changing yours. Share it with them as a gift. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you for being open to new ideas about how your brain works. Thank you for committing to becoming a better learner. I'm so glad you're here. Keep learning, keep practicing, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.